Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We're marking Laylatul Qadr, as we are aware, and the goal of our religious life is not only to communicate with Allah, but to feel His presence in our lives. The heart of Ramadan is Laylatul Qadr. It is time to rejuvenate our spirituality. What does Qadr mean? Qadr actually means to measure, proper measurement, based on God's justice in this instance. God apportions what is proper and what is suitable for us. What we deserve, and the opportunity that we'll get in life, the bala that comes over us, the sickness, death, risk, or whatever good we get. This is what we mean by Qadr. When we say Taqdeer is what God destines. But you will also notice that in the surah, Tanazzalul Malaikatu, God is sending messengers. The idea, the fact that it is in a perfect tense in the verse shows that the Qadr night was not restricted to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It's an ongoing process. It continues until now. And tonight is the night of waking up the conscious. Hence the continuous istighfar, seeking for God's forgiveness. It is, after all, when we ask for forgiveness, what do? We're seeking, we are actually awakening our conscious. Why? Because when we sin, we lose touch with the divine. There's a beautiful tradition, actually, it's a dua from Abdul Abidin when he says, وَأَمَاتَ قَلْبِي عَظِيمُ الْجِنَايَةِ, meaning that my great sins have killed my conscience. فَأَحْيِهِ بِتَوْبَةِ مِنْكَ, so therefore revive my conscience, O my Lord, with your tawbah. And tawbah, by the way, does not only mean repentance, it also means to turn to. So revive my conscience by turning towards me, O my Lord. In another dua that we shall recite tonight, dua tawbah, the Imam teaches us to say, فَاجْعَلْ تَوْبَتِي هَذِهِ تَوْبَةً لَا أَحْتَاجُ بَعْدَهَا تَوْبَةً. Make this tawbah of mine such a repentance that I do not need to come to you to seek another tawbah. In other words, it should be so powerful, so true, that I do not need to come to you again to ask for another tawbah. This is also the night where we bond ourselves with the Quran and with the Ahlul Bayt. As we are aware, we put the Quran on the head and we invoke the names of the Ahlul Bayt, invoking Allah through these two means. And by the way, we do not ask from the Imams, please. We ask Allah. We ask the Imams to ask Allah, or we ask Allah directly. But we do not ask the Imams in themselves. Because themselves, the Imams will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So tawassul is different from asking an Imam. The Quran itself, I want to spend a few minutes to understand the power of the Quran. It's not just to understand the meaning and the message of the Quran. We need to go beyond that. Because the Quran is actually an encounter with God. We are encountering Allah when we recite the Quran. It is actually a sign of His presence. And that is why the verses in the Quran, if you've noticed, are called the ayat. This ayat, that ayat. Why? Because actually it's a sign of God. Just as nature is a sign of God, so is the Quran the sign of God. Importantly, I would say, just as faith cannot be imposed, I cannot impose my faith on anybody, similarly the meaning of the Quran cannot be imposed on anybody. I cannot come and tell you, this is what I believe the Quran means, and therefore you have to accept it. Because my interpretation is my understanding of the Quran. It is not the final interpretation. We will find that the more we open our minds to the Quran, the more the Quran will open itself to us. It's a two-way process. The more we open ourselves to the Quran, the more the Quran will open itself to us. Revelation, let us not forget, is open. Unfortunately, our minds are narrow and sometimes closed. If our framework, the way that we look at the Quran is restricted, then the meaning of that Quran and the message will be restricted. Because we are looking at the Quran from a very narrow angle. The Quran, as I always say, did not come to replace our intellect. It actually was revealed to enhance our intellect, to increase our intellect. And the more we recite the Quran, the more it opens up the treasures of the Quran towards us. This is my own line. More of the Quran is recited over us than by us. When we die, more of the Quran is recited over us than when we are alive. We recite the Quran. Every text, whether it is the script, the Bible or the Quran, is bound by language and meaning. After all, how does Allah communicate to us? Or how does the Bible communicate to Christians and Jews? Through language and through meaning. A faqih, a jurist, will look for ahkam, will look for rulings in the Quran. A grammarian will look at the Quran from a grammatical point of view. But I think that we need to let the Quran speak to us than we speak to the Quran. We cannot limit Allah to 7th century Arabia, as I've been saying. Rather, an eternal God speaks eternally. Let the Quran speak to us now, not just in the 7th century. As I said many a time, the heart of Islam is the Islam of the heart. I like that. The heart of Islam is the Islam of the heart. Subhanallah, I can hear that. Hence we need to go beyond the language of the Quran, because the language is restricted by meaning. But the spirit is not restricted. We need to go beyond the language to the spirit, because the spirit has no bounds. It has many possibilities. It is because of this that the Quran talks of maqal, parables, indicators. Why does the Quran use parables many a time? Maqalul labina, maqalu hada, and so on. Because parables go beyond the outer. They help access the inner, the spiritual. Parables take us from the outer to the inner. Look at this particular verse, for example. There has come to you enlightenment from your Lord. This is in chapter 6, verse 104. So whoever will see does so for the benefit of his or her own soul, and whoever is blind is against his own or own soul. In other words, the enlightenment from Allah, the word the Quran uses is basira. Basira comes from the word basar, which means to see, but it's actually a vision of the heart. A ru'ya, a vision of the heart, rather than a seeing of the eyes. And the Quran continues, I am not over a guardian over you. You have this basar, so to speak, the basair is the plural, that is the enlightenment from your Lord, and it is within you. Just look at it. It is because of this that the Quran talks of the signs of God, that God talks to us through various signs. I do not know, can you see this? This is in chapter 41, verse 53. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْأَفَاقِ وَأَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. That Allah said that we will show them our signs, ayatina, in the horizons and in their own selves. In other words, there are signs of God not only outside us, not only the horizon, but within us too. حَتَّى يَتَبَنَّهُمْ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. So that they may know that this is the truth. أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِ بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. Is it not sufficient that Allah is a witness over everything? That's the translation. We'll show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves, so that it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. What the signs do is to challenge us to go beyond the ayatullah to Allah Himself. Unfortunately, when we look at the signs, whether it is nature or it is the Quran, we stop there. But actually signs speak to us, challenge us to go beyond the signs, beyond the ayatullah, as they're called, to Allah Himself. Signs have no independent existence in themselves. They exist merely to point to something or somebody else. Ayatullah do not display anything but God Himself. Because it is through this ayatullah that we see the infinite light, the majesty, and the glory of God. I don't know if you have ever seen pictures or even seen the actual northern lights. You know the northern lights? Aurora.
Yep.
Yeah, you see the lights. Others see the majesty and glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just the lights themselves. If you've seen shooting stars and so on. It is through these signs that we can move from the form, which is the outside, to the substance. From the outer to the inner. We also need to nurture the soul. The body grows as it is physical. The soul evolves as it is spiritual. That evolution needs a spiritual movement, what we call, as the Quran says, وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ. Talking about the signs, by the way, just to give you a parable, that before we talk about the spirit, it's just a red light. When you see a traffic light, you can just look at the light and admire the light, but that red light is telling us something else, that there is danger, you better stop. Similarly, when we look at the ayatullah, the signs of God, we need to go beyond those signs. And one of the ways is to engage in a journey of self-discovery, as it's called. The journey of the soul. Those who have discovered themselves are not the same as those who have not discovered themselves. Mullah Sadra, the great Shia philosopher, talks of 4 journeys of the soul. The first is the self to the self, through gnosis. Gnosis is the inner journey and the discovery of your own self. Now, this is a very deep and technical subject. I do not have the time to go into it. But one of the first steps of journey towards the self is to soften the soul with what is called riyazat. Riyazat means devotional exercises, whether it is recitation of the Quran, whether it is contemplation, whether it is through extra prayers, fasting, whatever it may be. It is at this point that we begin to know our own soul. And when you know your own soul, you know your own self. We explore how to develop it. Once we have explored our own soul, then we journey the second way, from the self to God. We observe our inner development, and we discover God through our own existence by making our soul submissive and attain complete inner composure. You may have seen people who are at peace with themselves and with everybody else because they have found their Lord. The key element here is to remove everything but Allah from the path in this journey of the soul. The third level is from God to the self. In other words, once you have found Allah, you have a complete peace, what is called wahdatul wujud, meaning the oneness of existence. You exist in the presence of your Lord. And then you return to the self, from God to self, as Mullah Sadr calls it. Connection with the inner core of the self. And when you are connected when we are connected with our own inner core, the core which comes from Allah, we experience Allah and His influence in every waking moment of our life, in every second. My friends, true Jannah, now I know a lot of us are looking forward to Jannah, and we are telling all the huris that they're going to enjoy and so on, or huras in the case of women. But true Jannah, in my understanding, is the permanent presence of Allah in our lives. And true hell is a separation from God. You remember that verse that we just recited in Dua Kumail? وَحَبْلِ صَبَرْتُ عَلَىٰ عَذَابِكَ فَكَيْفَ أَصْبِرُ عَلَىٰ فِرَاقِكَ. That supposing I can bear your punishment, your hell, how can I bear separation from you? Separation from God is worse than hell in the eyes of Imam Ali. That's why Imam Ali says that God has individuals to whom He speaks in their thoughts and in their minds. When human beings are spiritually close to the divine, they experience the world in a very different way. Extraordinary powers are given to extraordinary human beings. This is from Imam Ali, by the way. When we are at that level, then ibadah takes on a different meaning. We worship Allah through the vision of God and through His love. Not because of fear, not because you have to, but because you yearn to. To be effective then, that worship must consume us. You must feel a sense of fulfillment. That worship, ibadat, must infuse us with life and power, joy and ecstasy. Have you ever heard of the Baptists? Have you ever been to a Baptist church? You know, whatever they do is another issue, but the way that they worship is full of life, is full of spirit, you know. They're singing along. When you look at our worship, it's so dour at times, I'm afraid. You know, a lot of people are falling asleep during the ibadah. Am I right or wrong? Yeah, we can sing along. Actually, what I would like to propose, if OIL would let me do that, is OIL organize some dhikr sessions. How many of us would actually be interested in attending a dhikr session? Yeah, it's perfectly halal, believe me. That it really infuses joy and ecstasy and love in you. It becomes really motivating. Because the true love, true worship is to illuminate the heart, not to make your eyes go to sleep. Sometimes we sleep rather than illuminate our hearts. As we have been told, and the Prophet himself told us, that pray as if you see your Lord. فَإِن لَمْ تَرَى هُوَ يَرَاكَ. Because if you do not see him, he sees you. So pray as if you see your Lord. One of my favorite lines, when we go for Hajj, we see the house of the Lord. But those who do ibadah with that love, with that spirit, with that joy and ecstasy, they do not see the house of the Lord. They see the Lord of the house. And there's a big difference between seeing the house of the Lord and seeing the Lord of the house. It is only when we worship God in this way that our worship becomes meaningful. We get a change in ourselves, in our commitment, and in our values. As I said, to organize dhikr sessions, I'm dangling a carrot here now. So let's see if they take it up. Ibadat also means, after all, by the way, there is a beautiful verse in the Quran that we must have heard many a time. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَقُلْ إِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. If my servants ask you about me, O Prophet, tell them I am close. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِي. I answer the call of those who call out to me. In other words, calling out to God means also getting closer to God. That God is close, but he wants us to call out to him, and he will answer us to us. Ibadat also means not only just sitting on the prayer mat and praying and reciting and so on. It also means being closer to God by being morally upright. This chapter 49, verse 13, in which very famous verse that Allah said that I created you from one male and one female and into different tribes and different nations so that you may know each other and that you may attain taqwa. We are created, what this verse tells me, that we are created to be a member of a family, the human family, because God says we created all of you from single parents. The forms of the people are different. Some are black, some are white, some speak different languages, some are tall, some are short, and so on. But our substance is the same. Whatever color you may be, ethnic background, religious background, we all carry the Spirit of God. So we are all united in our differences. Our forms of worship are different. People worship God in different ways. But yet our object of worship is the same. We worship Allah. We worship God. Ishvara, Mungu, Khuda, whatever we want to call him. The tongue speaks different languages, but yet the heart speaks the same language. The language of morality. Since we belong to the same universal family then, our moral law should be universal. That moral law which tells us to protect the rights of all human beings. We cannot show one level of ethics to Muslims and another level to other Muslims because frankly that's unethical. It goes against the grain of the Quran, the spirit of the Quran. This quotation, by the way, is from Dr. Sarouche, if you've heard of him. Sarouche says very correctly, do non-believers get less compassion from God? Why should we then discriminate against others? The Prophet ﷺ says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. If you don't spread mercy, you will not find mercy. You want to find mercy? Then you show mercy to others. We, as human beings, do not need to share the same religion. We need to share the same moral commitment to others. And this is the language of fitrah, which again we shall recite about in chapter 30 in the Quran today. We've all heard about it. Fitrah is a language which is a universal language, the language of the heart, the language of the soul, an ethical language which is common to all human beings because it connects us with each other, gives us our first identity, which is the human identity. I'm a human being, then I'm a Muslim. Fitrah also provides a moral direction to us, tells us how that how to behave with others. My sisters and brothers, my time is running short, but I have another 5 minutes, I think. And I'm almost at the end. We are born human, but we are not born humane. We are born human physically. We need to become human morally. That is why no baby is born pious or a hypocrite. You don't say that this child who just been born is a very pious child or a hypocrite. Because religion doesn't change. Our religiosity changes. And our religiosity changes when our morality changes. The more moral we become, the more religious we become. The two are deeply connected. We cannot be religious until we are moral. The more good we do, the more godly we become. Because Allah watches us, how we behave with His fellow creatures, with His creatures. More and more in the West, I find that we talk of being politically correct, or whatever we do, we have to be politically correct. I wonder, have we asked ourselves, are we morally correct? That's an issue that we need to ask ourselves more and more. In the West, I never hear this discussion of being morally correct. Unless, of course, you happen to be Bill Cosby. Sorry, I had to put that in. The more we grow morally, the more we evolve spiritually. The more spiritual we become, because we become closer to fellow human beings. The best form of worship then is to understand God and attain God's perfection. And perfection only comes about when we reflect the divine beauty within us. As I've been saying, I will end with this, that we all have certain attributes that Allah has given us. And the more we develop the attributes, the more we perfect them, the closer we get to the perfect one. In many ways, when we show love to others, we receive more love from God. In other words, we are perfecting that attribute of love. We perfect attributes of compassion, of forgiveness. And the only way to do it is by developing them, nurturing them. And when we nurture our moral values, we're actually also nurturing our spiritual values too. Because we cannot be spiritual if we are immoral. And we cannot be moral unless and until we try to become more and more spiritual. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
The other day, you had a slides going on that there are many laws in the Quran, there are many different states in the Quran, and it changes by the time. I mean, we can have amendments as long as it doesn't go against the, ethically it doesn't go against the morality of the Quran. You brought up one of the issues that in the West, we could take interest just to develop ourselves financially in the West, because that's normal over here. We cannot get stable unless we don't get into that thing. But doesn't the Quran say at one point that if you take interest, you're waging war against Allah? So how would that contradict, and how would that not contradict with that?
It's great that we have this question. Question time do help me actually to refine my thoughts, to refine my ideas. Again, we have to look at the context. The context the Quran is talking about is exploitation, usually, human to human exploitation. That is haram until today. The Quran is not addressing a banking system, an economy, a capitalist economy that we have today. If I take interest from TD Bank or whichever bank, CIBC, am I really exploiting them? If anything, they're using my money. They're more than happy to give interest so they can use my money to invest somewhere else. That's a very different scenario from me coming to you, asking you for some money, and you exploiting me by charging an exorbitant interest rate. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, I do.
So that's why just because the Quran uses the word riba, it does not necessarily reflect on today's world here. We have to keep in mind that the Quran is eternal, but the laws are speaking to a specific context. If the Quran is talking about that we should take what our right hand possesses, which means slaves, are we to understand that we should go around taking slaves today? Do you see what I'm trying to say? So yes, the spirit of the Quran remains totally intact. But we have to look at the context of those verses. Otherwise, me and you would still be trading in camels and oats and barley. don't know if you have camels anywhere.
Only on Bakri.
Anyone else?
What about the credit cards? That's 18%.
Credit card, what about it?
20%.
18, 20%. Well, the best thing is don't use them. Or pay on time. If you pay within a month, you're okay, right? It's a choice that we choose. But let's face it, if we don't take mortgages, how many of us can actually afford to buy a house? Very few. So we are in that system.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam.
I just want to first let you know that when I usually come for a lecture, my attitude is adversarial. I'm looking for something that I can question. And I could not but say today I had nothing I could question. I commend you for a really good lecture. Thank you very much. But I would like to stretch one point a little further. You said that as long as we abide by the spirit of the Quran, that is how you could take the Quran and make it applicable to modern times. You didn't say it. I'm extrapolating what you said. I went for a lecture somewhere else, and what they had suggested is that perhaps we could have an exercise where experts look at what the Quran suggests, for example, modesty. Then take modesty and see what is modesty in the context of today, and make that modesty. I'd like you to comment on that.
I have a way of answering a difficult question, which is no comment. Next question. No, seriously. No, I think also we need to look not only at the spirit but also the ethical, moral vision of the Quran. In other words, those should not be violated. The hijab is one of those because it's a requirement. When the Quran talks of, for example, the jilbab, chapter 33, verse 59, it's referring to a particular mode of covering for women, which includes the hair also. So in that sense, because it falls within the moral vision of the Quran, therefore I would personally argue that it is very much required even today. You know, the form of the hijab can change, this kind, that kind, as long as the hijab includes the covering of the hair, not the face, not even the chin, and also include the proper loose clothing. And by the way, just to give you a quick pointer, this is connected with my previous lecture, which is the question of chin for women. Some women also put the hijab on the chin. And there you use the urf, because what is required is the face. Is the chin part of the face? And the urf say no, so you do not need to cover the chin.
Could you please come forward? Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam.
Really exciting, excellent lecture. Thank you, Oils. Why always you guys speak about the modesty in women when men have to be dressed up modestly, right? They never talk about that. Okay, that's just a comment. The other question is, in the Quran, in especially Surah Fatiha, we are saying, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Only you do we worship and only you we ask for help. So when as Shias go wrong, we ask help from Imam Ali all the time. We all the time say, Diyari mother, Diyari mother. And so many other things we say which don't make sense, goes against the Quran. Can you comment on that, please?
No comment. Seriously, yeah. No, I understand. I think this has been answered many a time with your own husband, of course, which is that of tawassul. Personally, I'm doing from my own personal angle, I always ask Allah. If I ask the Imam, it is that they should ask Allah on my behalf. But I would never ask the Imam per se. Because the Imams themselves used to ask Allah. And the Imams themselves are nothing but the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They do not control our risk. They do not control our sustenance. They do not control our destiny. It is shirk for us to believe that Imams control our lives or our destiny. Absolutely. They have told us in very clear terms. They can ask Allah on our behalf, but we ask Allah also directly. So to think that, that we worship the imams or we ask of the imams is totally wrong. We ask Imam Ali because he has been given that power, that's all.
One final question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam.
You mentioned how we're human before we're Muslim, and how we should get along with respect of all other individuals who follow all other faiths. Why doesn't that also apply to sexual orientation, especially now the fact that we have more and more proof that it's in their genetics and it's not something they choose to do?
Yeah, even the question of sexual orientation, that does not mean that a person who has a different orientation, we should look down upon them, we should mock them or whatever. It's their lifestyle, and we can't go around being judgmental. It is between them and their God. We don't accept that particular orientation religiously, fine. But we live in a culture or we live in an environment which requires us to be respectful to all. And by the way, this is nothing new. Even within Muslim societies, don't you think that there were lesbians and homosexuals in the past? Of course there were. And they were what is called kind of hidden under the carpet, so to say, swept under the carpet. Nobody really talked about it. But if you look at, there are books written about homosexuals in Islam, of how to treat them. And it's all over the history, Islamic history, it's nothing new. Maybe we did not vocalize it, we did not talk about it, but it is there. The only point that we would be totally against is when homosexuals or lesbians misuse that to try and prey on children, etc. That's a different thing. Or to try and spread their acts. But what I'm saying is when it comes to treatment of others, we need to be respectful to them. When I was teaching in Denver, I remember 2 of my colleagues were openly gay. They were very nice people, so we had to interact with them. But we don't need to kind of look down upon them, to dehumanize or to demonize them.